that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but these stories should be heard. Yeah, every story matters, we should rise and fall together, and that's why we rep progressive and...
Oh, good morning, everybody. We have a special treat for you. Andy's with us this morning, and he's able to sit down. Yay, Andy. Good morning.
Has it come to this? That my greatest accomplishments this week is sitting. Congratulations. You can do what every other human being can do. You're special.
Well, I mean, it's small steps. We have to celebrate little victories because, you know, everything else is on fire. So, yay, Andy.
Yay. Well, I can't take all the credit for my success this morning. My lovely wife, Debbie, brought home an inversion table. And this is not a conversion table, an inversion table. So she's not changing me to metric. It's basically you strap your feet in on this table and it flips you so that your upper body is lower than your legs, and it has a tendency to stretch your back out in space, which apparently is very important when you have a herniated disc. So I was afraid to, and not because I'm not afraid of rides or roller coasters or bungee jumping or anything like that. It's because I was afraid that if I get in this thing and my back locks up on me, I'm in big trouble. So I did a day cookie yesterday.
A day cookie, you want to explain what a day cookie is?
Okay, so I've been using marijuana edibles to sleep through the night. And if it wasn't for those, the circles under my eyes would be quite a bit larger. So my back was being problematic, and it kind of felt like I was going downhill for 3 days, and the pain was getting worse, and I was getting less comfortable. Deb said, why don't you just do a portion of a cookie, right? So I did, and I started to feel pretty good. It was the evening, and I thought, I'm stoned, what the hell? Let's try the inversion table. So I get on this table, and they strap me in and flip me up, and I'd say I'm probably at about only maybe 20 or 30 degrees past level. It feels like you're completely upside down, hanging off the side of a building, right? When you're not used to it. But so I'm there, and Deb says, so how do you feel? I said, weird. She says, how's your back feel? Weird. She says, why do you feel weird? Well, I'm stoned.
You're stoned.
I'm upside down. It's a little bit of a surreal moment. But I could actually... It's a strange sensation, but as your body kind of pulls down the table, it's a very strange sensation of stretching and your back not wanting to give up and being a little tweaky, and then it feels like it gives a little bit, and so I spent a good 10 minutes on this thing, and then they flipped me back over, and I got out of there. And I was hell of a lot straighter than when I got on it. So where were you inversion table 4 weeks ago?
That's amazing. Well, I have a friend who does the trapeze, and she swears by it. So, well, whatever it was that got you back here, seated in place and not on the roller rink, we appreciate it. Thanks, Nurse Deb.
Yes. Yeah, she gets all the credit. I've been a drain on this household's ability to sustain itself for the last month, and it's just been demoralizing. And then the last 3 days of feeling like the pain's returning and not having as much mobility and not being able to find a comfortable place to sleep. And then, wake up this morning feeling so much better.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to hear it. And apparently we need you back. You are the linchpin of your household and of this show in particular, as well as everything else that we do here. So welcome back. Andy, we have a ton of stuff to talk about this morning.
Yes.
So I have a handy little list here, and I'm gonna, obviously we've got the protests and the riots and all of that. So that's the obvious part, and I'm gonna put that aside for a second. There's in the backdrop of all of this chaos and social upheaval, there's something going on that people are not aware of because it's, not in your face. But today is the eve of Super Tuesday, the new Super Tuesday. Tomorrow being June 2nd is when a number of states hold their primary elections. So I think I have that up here. Or at least I did. Hold on one second. So Super Tuesdays. All right. So June 2nd, call it the new Super Tuesday, just because a lot of these states move their primary to today because of the COVID threat. Like Illinois did not. So that's where we had a spike in COVID cases, and we had a couple poll workers who passed away because we did not have the proper safety equipment in place. We didn't have a full understanding what was going on. Our Democratic governor and all of our Democratic establishment here were all for Joe Biden, so they were pushing it. They were even asking Republicans to vote for Joe Biden. So yeah, there you go.
Well, he has more in common with them.
He does, actually. So tomorrow, Delaware, Indiana, Maryland, Montana, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and South Dakota. They are all having their primaries. So we encourage you to send in your mail-in ballot today. Not only your mail-in ballot, send it in. Make sure it gets postmarked appropriately, but you've got to hold these people accountable to make sure that your ballot gets counted, because we saw in Wisconsin where a number of ballots were just not counted, tossed out, or just, oh, hey, look, there's a bin of ballots. We're just not going to count them. So you are literally having to fight to get, number one, your vote cast, and two, counted. And the reason why this is so important is there's a number of reasons, really. So of this, I'm going to leave this up for just a second. It's not just, number one, your constitutionally guaranteed right as a citizen to cast a vote. But all of these down ballot races are so critical. And if you still don't understand why they're important, I want you to go ahead and take a look around the country today. Because whether a state is run by a Democrat or a Republican, there's absolute chaos. Like Minnesota has a Democratic senator, Amy Klobuchar. She was the former DA who neglected to prosecute the officers who had been brought before her when she was DA. That's an elected role. And now she's a senator. And then you have the Democratic governor who is allowing the, and we'll get to this because it's crucially important. He's allowing them to, the National Guard to come in, but not just the National Guard. They are allowing live ammunition now. That means the rubber bullet thing. If you get shot, you would be lucky to have a rubber bullet now.
They're only good for eyes.
Right. We're going to shoot people in the face with a rubber bullet. So this is why these down ballot races matter. In addition to this, are your delegates. So these are the delegates to the DNC. When you go to vote, and Bernie's still on the ballot. So, if it makes you feel better, vote Bernie, do that. But it's the delegates right now that are important. And there's a there's a really big reason why. So right now, and this ties into some of the shenanigans going on with the DNC right now. So your delegates, you have to have a certain number of delegates as a candidate to have the right to put those delegates on the Rules and Bylaws committee. So the minimum number is 1,200. If you don't reach 1,200, then you're SOL. All you can do is stand outside and, you know, shout, and it has no effect. But once you reach 1,200 delegates, you can get at least one person on the Rules and Bylaws and the convention committee. And what would happen then is, so think about all the reforms, the Unity Commission and all of that stuff that happened for years. It was like 2 years in the making. We had people on the committee who could make the case, who could argue for rule changes, and that's how we got the superdelegates, now the automatic delegates, off of the first vote at the convention. So I want to give a shout out to one of the DNC members. His name is David McDonald. He's out of Washington State. Congratulations, David. You have now become the Emperor Palpatine of the DNC with your continued bullshit. So let me tell you about David McDonald. David McDonald out of Washington State. So after we got the reform that we wanted, not all of it, but we got a big chunk of it, where these delegates, and these are, they're called automatic delegates because they automatically get to go to the convention. There's no election required. And these are your high elected state Democratic Party members, like your governor, Secretary of State, things like this. So in the reform process, they used to be able to vote on the first ballot. And what we saw in 2016 is corporate media decided that they were going to put their thumb on the scales of public perception by saying that Hillary Clinton had all of these superdelegates behind her to artificially inflate her numbers. And part of the reason this works is because we're kind of stupid herd animals. Like, we'll jump on a bandwagon. Right? So if Andy and I are running for office and you hear that Andy has 200 people supporting him and I have 2, and you're on the fence, typically what we do is, oh, Andy's way more popular, I'm going to be on the winning team. And so you'll vote for Andy. And that's what was happening.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, right. Andy's way cooler.
Especially my special talents like sitting.
Yeah, there you go. Yay for Andy. So you would vote for Andy, and regardless
vote for
of what.
Andy, he can sit with the best of them.
Right. Right. So that's what was happening in the 2016. While we were talking about Russia, no, it was corporate media that was manipulating, and the only reason it works is because we allow it. Right, at an individual and a group level, we're like, oh no, and so it's happening again. And what's amazing to me is I'm seeing posts about, well, Russia's doing it again. No, Russia's fucking not. Will you stop with the Russia thing? We are doing it. So I even have people who were big Bernie supporters and call themselves progressives telling me over the weekend that I am pissing in the wind and the election's over. No, it's not. And you don't understand what is happening. So we have this fight for delegates right now so that we can have some input into what the rules look like at the convention. Right? So,
and it doesn't matter if you're Dem enter or Dem exit or Green Party or whatever. We have to keep all options on the table. Right? We can't just abandon something because we think that it's dead, right? It's an avenue that needs to still be pursued, right? As much as people think that we should abandon the Democrats and just start a third party or join the Green Party or whatever the consensus is, you still have to leave the option for the Dem enter strategy. because it's still a viable strategy if you can get it to work properly, if you get enough people behind it, right?
Right, and that's exactly right. And you're not going to hear this information anywhere else, which to me is, okay, we're putting it out there, but we're just not enough. So I would ask people who hear this program, who are listening to the information that we're putting out there, please share it and let people know. I mean, there's a reason we've been interviewing all of these great candidates, like Jennifer, her election in Indiana, if you live in Indianapolis in District 5, vote for Jennifer and then go all the down ballot races, because there are a couple points here. If we can flip the Democrats in the House to progressives, and we can flip the Senate, which there are great Senate races, right? We interviewed the gentleman out of Arkansas who's running as an independent, Dan Whitfield. Imagine if we were able to achieve that, then it's not going to matter who's sitting in the White House, because they will be powerless.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And the current administration is already finding out that there are significant limits to what they can do with presidential orders. Like, we still have social media, and the other,
and a relatively unbiased court system in certain areas.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right. And then he also tried to designate Antifa as a terrorist organization, and he found out real quickly he doesn't have the authority to do that. First of all, it's not an organization, it's a description of people who are against the fascists. So that I don't know, that would have been my grandfather and my grandmother who fought in World War II. All veterans are anti-fascist, but he can't do that as much as he may want to. And so there are limits there, and we can increase those limits should this particular administration remain in the White House, if we are paying attention to the remainder of these primary elections. That's why it's so important. So let's get back to Emperor Palpatine, David McDonald, and some of the shenanigans he's trying to put through. And in fact, he's actually successful. So what he did was, under the cover of COVID, he has been, since we got the reform in place, he has been trying to undo that. He wants the superdelegates back and has said as much. So what he has done is, okay, we have this COVID thing, and he's saying, take it for what it is. He's saying that meeting as a convention in person in a giant room is unsafe. So we want to do it virtually, which sounds good. Okay. A reasonable person would be like, okay, well, let's hear your plan. So he wants to do it virtually, but in doing so, he is asking the DNC members to vote to give the convention committee unilateral authority to change the rules. There are a couple problems with this. Number one is the way the process is set up now, and Don Ford has explained this extensively. In the DNC rules and bylaws, when you change a rule, it's redlined. Like when you're doing editing on a Word document, you can see what was there, and it's goes into red and it's crossed out. So you have kind of a version control history on the document. When you give unilateral control to the convention committee, that goes away. So you no longer have a history of what came before. And you allow this small committee to make whatever rules they want. So if you've read I'm sure that there are like 5 of us in the country who have read the DNC bylaws, all of that potentially goes away too. And you are giving sole authority to this very small group of insiders, of which progressives are not represented at all. So
I was going to say, chances are there aren't any in there that are Bernicrats.
Yeah, there are not. So this is what's going on now. And what's kind of egregious is you had all of these DNC members who they got their vote yes or no for the provision that was discussed on the phone call. Well, most of these people did not even attend the phone call. And now they're asked to vote on this rule, check yes or no. And then there was this big long, whereas the DNC, and it was written in legalese. And of course, when you're going to do some shenanigans, you take the statement, reverse it, and then kind of obfuscate, hide what you're trying to do in the legalese. So this document that they sent out, and this is Chairman Perez, has all that legalese in it, and then your ballot as a DNC member is check yes or no. And you had a number of DNC people go, well, I think we need to have the convention virtually, so I'm going to vote yes. You moron. What you just voted for was not only the convention to go yes for virtual, but to give unilateral control to this tiny group to change the rules permanently until the next 4 years to whatever they want. So what they could say is, we can appoint any nominee at this convention that we want through one person's vote, and this person will be David McDonald. And if that rule is sitting there in writing, it's done. You don't vote on it. There's no vote on it. It's done. You gave unilateral control to this tiny little group. So as much as it was a really bad movie, that the Star Wars movie, I forget which one it was, but it was the one with Jar Jar Binks. So I guess...
yes, the bane of Star Wars.
Right. So in this whole scenario, Perez is now Jar Jar Binks. And you have Emperor Palpatine standing in front of the DNC Senate saying, we need action now. And the entire Senate just went, sure, have it. So this is why tomorrow's election matters, and all the other primary elections thereafter, because we have to get to 1,200 delegates based on the vote. So you need to vote for Bernie Sanders, whether you're happy with him or not, doesn't matter. Vote Bernie Sanders, vote the delegates so that he gets the award of the delegate for the rules, and then we get more delegates to the convention. So there's 2 different delegate seats that you're voting for. Bernie Sanders gets the if he gets a certain number of votes, he gets a certain number of delegates, and then those delegates are down ballot, the ones that you are voting for. So if there are 5 Bernie delegates on your list and you don't know 3 of them, I need you to start vetting them right now, because part of the other part of the problem is we're not watching our flank, and we had people on the Bernie delegate list who never should have been on the list. These are establishment Dems who signed on to become Bernie delegates, and were allowed to do so.
Their only attribute is they're sneaky.
That's exactly right. Which is going to come in handy if all of this stuff goes through. Which, you know, it looks like David McDonald is going to be successful. And for all of you who are bitching about the reform didn't go far enough, guess what? We're going right back to what we had before, and worse, because we aren't paying attention. And I would really... I am saddened and dismayed that we don't take the time to actually read and pay attention. Our DNC members don't actually take the time to read and pay attention. If you're going to run to be on the DNC, maybe you could attend a meeting. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's those are my unreasonable expectations for people who are supposed to represent everyone in their district. But that's just me. I don't know. So that's the big thing that's happening this week, besides the protests and all the other bullshit that's going on, is there's still elections happening. Please pay attention, please vote, and then make sure your vote is counted. So that's my rant on David McDonald. And we are working on a larger article to explain all of this, as well as some weird thing that our revolution did. Rather than trying to explain this to their own members, and they've got big lists, they it appears that they have misrepresented what is going on, and they were telling their own list of people that delegates get to vote on the stuff at the convention, and that's not true at all. So I personally reached out to Joseph Gavardes, the chair of OR, and their media director, Paco, and I forget his last name, waiting to hear back from them with an explanation as to why they chose this wording to solicit for their members, but hopefully they'll get back to us. So Joseph, if you're seeing this, and you're probably not, but call me. So so there's that.
Call me.
Yeah, exactly. So so the next thing, we got to talk about protests and the riot. So Andy, what does Canada say about a citizen's right to protest?
Well, it always starts with "I'm sorry," right? And I have to be honest, there's not really as much reason to protest in Canada.
Well, you're just
based on
bragging
our
now.
and it's the other thing is you have to realize that protesting in Canada is seasonal too, right? Because sometimes it's just too fucking cold to go outside. So that's a big deal, right? But God, I'm watching the protesters, and I've been, because of my inability to do certain things at the moment, have been watching, especially, and shout out to Unicorn Riot, that guy Miko, who's been constantly, like, almost like, I don't know if it's 12 or 14 hours a day, live streaming from Minneapolis, and just doing an amazing job and going around and interviewing people. And, I find it fascinating that the protesters are doing three things. Basically, they're peacefully protesting. They're also trying to avoid the police, and at the same time protecting local businesses.
Yes.
So they're not only are they doing their chanting, protesting, walking around, high-fiving, just to draw attention, they're also protecting local businesses from whoever is sending people that are intent on doing damage. These are not the local protesters. These, in some cases, it would seem that these are police plants or people from other states coming in just to cause some damage. So you have these protesters that are being blamed for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they are the ones, for the most part, that are protecting the local businesses. And their leaders in the groups are reminding people to stay together, right? To look out for one another and behave themselves.
Yeah.
It's surreal. These people, these guys, there's as many white people in these groups as persons of color, and the camaraderie is amazing. They're all, high-fiving and stuff when they meet, and chants and cheers, and, kind of in a move of solidarity and strength. They're behaving themselves. But they're the only ones that are looking out for the local businesses.
Right. So when I was watching, this administration and all his alt-right buddies trying to do their verbal jujitsu and saying, oh, it's the Antifa, no, bullshit is not the Antifa. Okay, so in Minneapolis, you had, on day one, a bunch of people show up in unity, as you said, and then there were 4 white guys who showed up who were trying to start some shit. And what happened was everybody came in and said, no, you're not going to do that. And these 4 white guys got pushed out. Nobody knew who they were. And then there was another one where we can see the video evidence of him smashing windows at the AutoZone, and he got followed, and then was later identified by these his ex-wife actually is the one who outed him, and it was confirmed, and he is an on-duty police officer in St. Paul. So I went through and tried to find the article from like a year and a half ago where there were allegations of the same police department with 4 officers off duty and trying to cover their faces involved in a drive-by beating of a witness. Right, so this is a pattern of behavior for some of these police officers. And then in addition to that, while the president and others are pointing at the left, what we're seeing from the FBI and Minnesota and Utah and LA is that these are out-of-town people with the alt-right, not the left. And there's a big article, there's a number of articles talking about how these people are there to instigate and accelerate. They're called accelerants, where they are setting fires and breaking into businesses and things like this. Now, I'm not going to say 100% across the board these people are responsible, because let's go back to the herd mentality thing, right? If in the heat of the moment you see these 4 guys over here breaking into a store, there may be some regular folks are like, yeah, I'm going too, right? So there is a little bit of that, especially Atlanta at the CNN building, but this is their role, is to start something and accelerate what's going on and set more fires and destroy more businesses. And so there are like 400 arrests of these people already across the country. And so we know who they are. We already know who they are. We know their affiliations. We know what their motivations are. So, you know, I hate to throw my parents under the bus, but when I was growing up, as I got older, you come to that realization that some of us do. My parents were a really good example of what not to do. So I just kind of learned that, oh, okay, all right, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to do the opposite. So I would suggest when you hear something come out of the White House, be like, okay, all right, I'm going to do the opposite of what you suggest, right? Don't inject bleach. Don't try to create new holes for sunlight. Just don't listen to what he's saying, do the opposite. So when he's telling you that the anti-fascists are bad, maybe flip that and consider it. So Andy, to your point, we see it over and over again. And, you know, I love my city, Chicago, because one of the photos that came out was an officer who, there are a number of photos I got for Chicago. When I got up this morning, I'm checking trending hashtags. I'm like, what the, oh my God, Chicago. So one of the photos came out, and this is coming out in many cities, but there was an officer in riot gear who was separated from the rest of his little group, his buddies.
His clique.
He's clique. Yeah, and he's like, even though he's got all the armor and stuff on, you can tell this is not a really big guy. He's like average. And he's surrounded by some of the biggest, like, linebacker type black guys. And they're defending him from the rest of the crowd. Right? So they are shielding him from the rest of the crowd who has just been fired upon, tear gas, abused, some of the worst offenses, and we can see compilations everywhere. Some of the worst civil rights abuses are occurring by these officers. And these guys are holding them back and saying, no, you're not going to touch this guy. right? So yeah, to your point, this and you know what, my husband brought up a good point. In these cities, in these small cities like Flint, Michigan, and things like this, where the sheriff and the officers joined the protests, everything remained peaceful. But when you show up in riot gear, ready for a fight, that's what you're gonna get. That's what you want. You don't show up to a football game in football gear expecting to, it's not a swim meet at that point. You're gonna play. You're gonna play ball. So this is what we have. And we posted an article from The Nation where this information just got leaked about the plan. They call it the storybook, which it's a playbook, military term, playbook, where a lot of these big cities, some of this money under Obama, thank you, Obama, went to buy military gear and to train them. So now we understand that these big cities have been trained by Israeli elite troops. So if you're waking up in the morning going, Jesus, my city looks like Gaza now, there you go. We trained our police force to be a military force with the same people who are abusing human rights in Gaza. So what did we think was going to happen?
Exactly what they wanted to happen.
That's exactly right. They want to play war in our cities. And this is not policing. This is something else. This is occupation. Right?
Yes, it's divide and conquer, right? It's a means if we can get our citizenry to be angry with the police force, then they won't be as angry with the government.
Well, I don't know how effective that tactic's going to be, but yeah.
Listen, this is just as far as I'm concerned, this is phase 2 of the revolution.
Right, and I think what did it for me was, so we've been really busy here scouring for news reports, things, the stories, and trying to bring them out, as well as, like you said, Unicorn Riot. Rock on, guy. He has just been phenomenal. So there are some, like the Gravel Institute put together a compilation, and they've been pushing back significantly on elected officials who are trying to say, oh, it's not. No, it is you. So to all of these independent media who is bringing the real story out, kudos, and please support them. I'm losing my train of thought. There's just so much to say. But what got me was Provo, Utah. I checked in on Provo. Provo! It's like 99% white vanilla. It is like a
sounds like a breakfast cereal.
Right. It is like our tiny little uppity Canada enclave. And I'm checking in on Provo, and there's a police car that has been flipped over and set on fire. I'm like, okay, Provo's not having any more of this shit either.
Yeah, well, it's been coolish.
Right? So all of these, and they bring up the map on the corporate media where it's the red where there's an area, and I'm like, no, you guys got it wrong, because I just saw Provo and you don't have any of Utah colored in. So I can go to each and every one of these states. So this is where our own network of progressives is really coming into play.
Yes.
Things that we're seeing in Detroit. Oh my God, what they're doing in Detroit is it's beyond criminal. These are like war crime level things. The police are literally running over protesters. It's none of this is okay. And I keep thinking back to, this is the 50th anniversary of Kent State, where you had the National Guard go in against students on Kent State University who were protesting the Vietnam War, and they opened fire and killed 4 students. So we're at the 50th anniversary of this, and then the article that was posted here, you'll see it in our chat, talks about how these states have allowed the National Guard to use lethal lethal, meaning real bullets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thing. Please be safe out there. If it goes to that point, then I think that there's a mistake to think that it's 1950 or it's 1960 because liberals own guns. I'm one of them. I know how to shoot. In fact, the irony of my state is I have a Floyd card, but because I also have a medical marijuana card, I can't buy any more guns.
And that doesn't make sense to me because, you know, you just sometimes you're just so mellow, you know.
I would think that you want me
What are you
mellow.
gonna do with a gun except like take sexy pictures or something? You know, like I mean, it's just people aren't thinking about any of this, right? The whole when you step back and take a look at the entire picture of what's happened, right? This is all stemmed from a single incident in Minneapolis where a policeman, and let's not mince words here, a black man was executed in broad daylight by the police for the crime of what, a counterfeit bill.
Well, actually, we're finding out.
Executed.
We're finding out now that the maybe more than one, but definitely one of the officers had a prior relationship with Floyd.
Yeah, as a bouncer or something. But
Yeah.
regardless of all the reason, we're talking about a police act of violence against a person of color, once again, in a stressful time with coronavirus and Americans being locked in their homes and also afraid that they're not going to be able to feed their families, let alone pay their bills, because the federal government really refuses to help them in any way, right? Like that's on top of all of this. So people are striking out because they're angry because of this one incident of police brutality. So what does Trump do? He says, well, we're going to start shooting now. Yeah, that's how you get people to settle down.
Right. The one point that a point of contention of what you said is it's not just this one. It's this pattern that we've seen. Not just the pattern of you're killing people. You are allowed to, as a police officer, go into somebody's apartment and shoot them dead now. So it's the occurrences of where we have declared open season on a segment of our population and no one is being held accountable. So it's these two pieces together. It's not just that we saw a man murdered in broad daylight, but that the people in charge, Democrats, still decided to charge him under. So this guy could potentially serve 2 years in prison, whatever. But then, like the article that we posted, the kid who rolled through a stop sign is now facing 10 to 20 years for rolling through a stop sign. That is why people are protesting. It's not just the deaths and things like this, is that we have unequal protection in practice that is completely antithetical to the Constitution of the United States. We know that our healthcare system is a dual system. If you have money and access, you happen to know a board member of the hospital, or you have the money, you can get the healthcare that you need. If you don't, you're screwed. And so that's what we see under COVID. And then the relief that came through went to Wall Street, not to small businesses. So there is our dual system at work. We have people on bread lines and starving. 1 in 5 children right now is not getting enough food. And you have these pictures of the food banks, empty shelves and still long lines. And yet we have Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi squabbling over whether we deserve, number one, to live, to eat, but they're going to give more money to Wall Street. And then on top of it, we have the police force that is killing people, not follow. There is no rule that says that they are not bound by the same rules that we are. And yet in practice, we see over and over again where that is the case. And I think all of these things right now, people are just done. They're tired of it. And this is why people are coming in the streets, because there's no way to hide it anymore. It's just, it's
Right,
blatant.
right.
So even our little Beckys and our Karens can no longer make a credible argument that all lives matter, or that it's not every police officer, because what we're saying is, like, Andy, if I watch you rob a bank and I don't tell you no, I'm considered an accomplice.
Right.
Because you and I don't have money, access, or power.
Right.
But in that circumstance, you cannot call yourself a good law-abiding officer if you are not trying to hold your brethren accountable. And so people always push back, well, I'll be threatened, then you're going to get threatened. Maybe you need to find a new line of work, but you need to be a whistleblower. And these are these tests of character that we all face, big or little. And if you need to find a new way of employment to do the right thing, this is the test that is before you.
And what did they think was going to happen, right? Like, I mean, for God's sakes, this, with all the things that have gone, and let's not forget to include that they've basically stolen the primary from Bernie, the most popular politician in the United States, who raised the most money of any politician in any candidacy of all time. You don't do that without some kind of support, right? And so all these young people that had a wisp of hope that Bernie could possibly get through, who speaks for them, right? And once again, he is cheated out of the Democratic primary.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, just like 2016, so much promise. He was leading the polls. Everything looked great after Nevada. And now, oh, okay, well, they took it. Neoliberal, they're giving it to a neoliberal again, who is not going to change a thing. It's back to status quo, right? We're going to lock you in your house, but we're not going to give you the ability to eat. And now we're going to shoot black people, right? So this is a straw. This is the final straw, right? People are fed up. They're done, especially young people.
Oh yeah, and it's back to that old phrase: those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. So we're looking at a scenario that so closely mimics the French Revolution. And what I'm seeing on social media is people are now passing around building plans for guillotines.
Yeah.
And one thing that I do want to push back on that post is your guillotine needs to be taller. Because it's the velocity that makes a clean cut. So I am not advocating for violence here, but I'm going to say your plans are a little off. But the whole hashtag, and I've been saying this for about a year, the hashtag Eat the Rich was a joke. I don't think people are starting to joke about this now. And when you have Pelosi pandering to the donor class, when you have Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and all of these people pandering to the donor class, and then what was it, the one Hollywood executive at the beginning of the COVID outbreak here, on his Instagram, which has now been deleted, posted pictures of his yacht and this beautiful sunset in the islands. And he's like, I'm out of here. Good luck with COVID. I'm self-isolating on his fucking yacht, and thought that was okay. Right? So this is a situation we're in. And I cannot stress this enough. If you are an elected official and you are going to continue doing what you have always done, and not stop to think about where we are, stop to listen, go to somebody's house who cannot pay their rent, their mortgage, and are worried about getting their electricity shut off. Go sit at the table and listen, because if you don't, there's only one way this is going to go.
Yes.
And that's...
And it's that expression, heads will roll. More ways than one.
That's exactly right. So on a lighter note, there's a reason why of all the cities across the globe that I have lived in, I love Chicago. I absolutely love Chicago. Because even when we are being complete, utter morons and assholes, we still have a sense of humor about what's going on. So one of the things that I saw this morning when I was checking, trending hashtags, and of course it comes up for me, Chicago, whatever. One of them was Lincoln Park Zoo. And of course my first reaction was like, oh Lord, what did you all do to Lincoln Park Zoo? And at first I was like, this can't be real. This can't be real. So I'm going to post one of the photos that came out. Because I thought, well, maybe y'all joking, something. This is no joke. Lincoln Park Zoo. Here's a giant hippo walking down the street. So, y'all fools broke into the Lincoln Park Zoo and you liberated the animals. And so now we got this picture of a neighborhood in a street with, what are you going to do with this giant hippo? Right? So this is Chicago. But this is not my favorite one from Chicago. I'm going to show my all-time favorite because ever since I lived here, now I've lived in Denver and other things where police have multiple modes of transportation. And I kept seeing these videos from other cities, in particular Detroit, and Minneapolis, they were using the horses to trample protesters. Right, so I'm like, that is the most egregious use of an animal that I have seen. They were taking their mounted patrols and running over people who didn't see them coming, couldn't get out of the way. It's just horrible. So one of my long-held hopes and dreams finally came through, and it's hilarious. So I want to share that with everybody. This was passed around social media, and this happened just the other night. So...
I'm go! It's real! Black Lives Matter!
I'd also like to say, I would like to say that this video needs a soundtrack, and I'm thinking it may be
stole it from the police!
Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy.
I stole the police horse!
What I love about this is the look at it. Now this is a potato quality video because it was a tiny little video that was posted to social media. But in the video, I will try to post a link to it so that you can see it for yourself and enjoy it over and over and over again like I have. In the video, the look of the passersby where there's just a regular guy, black guy on a horse riding down a Chicago street under where the L is downtown, and people are like, what? And you can hear him, just the joy in his voice go, yeah, it's real. I stole a police horse. And he's doing so well. I don't know if this is his first time on a horse, but it didn't look like it. He's got it down pat. He's get that horse, and he comes to the point where he's like, oh, they're throwing tear gas. So he's turning that horse, and bravo to you, dude. Absolutely.
And he's also got GPS on his phone.
He does, and you can hear it towards the end, police ahead. So GPS on the horse.
So better slow down.
Right, so I hope.
Oh, it's just him walking around and explaining to people, I stole it from the police. I just love that. That was
absolutely
the class. This should be the one, this should be the opening video in the montage that is a roundup of the day's action. This is just uplifting.
Yeah, absolutely. So bravo to my city, and Guy, I don't know who you are, and I will definitely not out you, but kudos. Absolutely. You completely made my year with that one event, and I hope that somebody woke up the next morning, looked out the window, and there was a horse in their backyard. Just chilling.
Or at least horse patooties.
Right, exactly. So let me think. Oh, we have a big event coming up this week on Wednesday. We have our live Ask Me Anything COVID special with Dr. Dylan Burdett, a virologist, who is actually working on the virus. He's not, you know, I know somebody and my roommate's cousin and blah, blah. No, an actual PhD doctor. We've had him on before. Everything he has said has borne out to be true as we go through. So he's going to be back, and we're bringing Dr. Peck, who is a medical doctor, internal medical specialist. So the two of them together can answer questions and dispel these myths, because I still have neighbors who believe that this whole thing is a hoax, that a mask is more detrimental to your health than the virus, and a number of other bullshit things that are actually going to cost people lives. And even though my neighbors appear to be somewhat on the slow bus, the short bus, I don't want them to die. It's weird. That's part of that liberal tree hugger mentality. I want to protect them from themselves. No, please don't put that fork in the outlet. That's not good for you. So that is coming up.
Unplug the toaster before you try to get the piece of bread out.
Right. Yes. Let's do that. So that is coming up on Wednesday. So you'll see some information rolling out today on that. Of course, Andy and I will be back on Wednesday and Friday, depending on what goes on. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're all going to be run off the air. But so that's coming out, and then a larger article as soon as we get one or two more pieces vetted and fact check on the DNC, what they're doing when I talked about David McDonald. So here we actually try to put out accurate information, not bullshit. So it takes us just a little bit longer to make sure that we've got absolutely everything correct. And once we get that out, we'll make sure that we distribute that and make sure that our revolution gets copies so that they can maybe stop putting out false information to their own lists.
And when you hear the name David McDonald, for all you Doobie Brothers fans, no relation to Michael McDonald.
We think, maybe, I don't know.
Taking it to the streets. You don't know me, but I'm your brother.
You can actually sing. That was terrible.
I know. I'm not trying to sing good. I'm trying to sing badly.
Very good. Well, all right, on that off-key note, we are out of here, but I do want to do a real quick shout out to our newest Patreon supporter, Mike Patino. Thank you so much. Even though we have such excruciatingly low overhead, every little bit helps. And I do want to make this point about independent, particular progressive media. We don't have paywalls. Right? So if we're supposed to be the fourth branch of government, you cannot designate content behind a paywall for someone who may not be able to afford it. So we at this network and most independent networks will never put content behind a paywall that is newsworthy. So the only thing that we might have is some silly little outtakes and what's coming up next for our Patreon audience. But our website and all of our content will never be behind a paywall because that's unethical and it goes against the journalism ethics. There exactly. Actually and is.
It's completely against the reason that we all got into this. You know, we want to change the world in our own way as much as we can, and putting stuff behind a paywall is denying people the information we want to get to them. So it doesn't make any sense.
That's exactly right. And I always kind of chuckle and shake my head when I go out to news sources and it's a corporate-owned site and they're like, well, because of COVID, we won't put this information behind a paywall. I'm like, you bitches know what you're doing. You know what you're doing, and you're going to do it anyway, and that's your own fault. So anyway, on that note, we're going to get out of here, and we will see you back here on Wednesday. And please stay tuned to our network on all of our social channels and our website for new information that's coming out that we can share with you and programs like this. So thank you, and have a lovely day.
Yes, goodbye. Take care.
This is Progressive Insider.
Yeah. Progressive insider, you know they wiser. This that new media company covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of. 'Cause you